Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
Well, on our podcast today, we have the strength coach known as Atlas Power Shrugged. He's the author of Old Time Lifts for Modern Lifters. And before I do his bio, I'll do my wife's bio of him as I was walking downstairs, which was, jeans and parking lot guy. So if you know who he is, you might get a good laugh out of that, and it'll make more sense as we dive into this. But his book, Old Time Lifts for Modern Lifters, just came out. Check it out. In it, he bridges the gap between classic strongman techniques and modern training science. With a deep respect for old school methods like the bent press, his training program combines foundational lifts with contemporary conditioning, focusing on simplicity and effectiveness for all lifters. His coaching style is dynamic and pragmatic, helping people achieve real-world strength that translates beyond the gym. I absolutely love that concept. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for the intro. I got to take notes and put that up somewhere. That sounded great. I don't think I've been able to make it sound quite that good myself. So thank you very much. And I'm really excited to be here. I remember, way back in the day seeing you, pull 1,000 pounds per reps and thinking, wait, hold on. I didn't even know people could pull 1,000 pounds, let alone per rep. So I never thought I would end up, on a podcast with you. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and well, I'm getting a little practice of that intro. So we did a three take shot on this with some tech difficulties. So a little fun getting started. But I've been a follower of yours for quite some time. I can't remember when I got turned on, but it's been quite some time where I've been able to watch a bit of your evolution. And one thing that always struck home to me about this that I really respected was making this accessible to everyone, removing the obstacles of you need X, you need a gym, you need fancy equipment, all this sort of stuff, while being a person that makes fancy, expensive equipment, right? But my philosophy around that has always been, how do we remove, the obstacles to make strong, actually moving heavy implements more accessible to the masses? And while my equipment costs a lot, it was accessibility in the standpoint of making sure that the movements are performed and feel comfortable. Somebody that's scared of squatting, they can squat. It feels right. And I'm not trying to push my equipment. If people may not know, but I was let go from Kabuki, so not really thing there. But the point being, we both had different ways of going about trying to make real world strength training accessible to people in different fashions based on whatever their obstacles around that may be. And my question to start this off is, how did you arrive with your philosophy? And, did you just one day, I'm going to lift weights, and went out in your parking lot and started going from there? And that's like you tied automatically to this Bronze Age lifting? Or was there some sort of evolution in getting to where you are?
Well, to be honest, it had nothing to do with me in a way. I kind of got somewhat lucky, really. I would have probably continued doing the same thing that probably a lot of folks do, just, going into the gym, squat, bench, deadlifts, half-hearted accessories, and just in kind of the way that a lot of hobbyist lifters do. You get to a certain point and stop progressing, but you keep doing the same thing anyway. But when the lockdowns happened in 2020, of course, the gyms got shut down. I'd been going to Gold's and Venice up until that point. Fun gym. It was more fun back in the day. But anyway, yeah, that's where I'd been going. And, when the lockdowns happened, all I had was a deadlift bar. I quickly got a couple bumper plates. At first, I only had 185 pounds because that was all the plates I could find at that time, because there was equipment shortages and whatnot, and quickly gathered some gymnastics rings. But of course, having that little equipment, you can't just go out and do squat, bench, and deadlift, right? So I knew that the old timers had gotten a lot of good results from very little equipment. So I'd read about that stuff for a long time. I first got introduced to it on Jamie Lewis's blog, Chaos and Pain, back in the day, if you're familiar with that. He was
I
right.
am. I'm not sure how our listener base, but he produces some interesting background history on lifting for sure, as well as some other content that's a little more
Right.
triple X rated. But
I don't endorse. I don't necessarily. I'm not recommending people without a strong stomach necessarily go to that blog. But he did.
yeah.
He made me aware of that stuff, and from there I got into a blog that, for whatever, that's entitled "The Tight Tan Slacks of Desoban," which is a weird name for it, but it's a gold mine of information that just it's got so many articles from the 1930s onward. Just really hard to search, really hard to find stuff. But I mean, you just go through it, you'll stumble upon a whole lot of awesome stuff. I was aware of the bronze and silver era. I said, it was always kind of in the back of my head, something I knew about, but I'd never really done a deep dive into a lot of this stuff because you read text descriptions of it and it just looks, it sounds insane. Like you read about Arthur Saxon just jumping a barbell up his back, and it's like, how does that even make sense? Like reading about it didn't make sense to me. The bent press, it seems like you're familiar with the bent press, which is a one
Oh,
arm.
yep.
Just for the lifters who aren't, it's a method of lifting a weight with one arm overhead that some folks have lifted over 300 pounds with, where you're essentially you're bending under the weight while supporting it on your torso instead of actually lifting it with your arm. And you read about it, it makes no sense, right? So with a lot of this stuff, I'd read about it, but I kind of wrote it off. Well, no, I didn't write it off, but I just said, that's too hard. I'm not going to try to figure any of that stuff out because it doesn't make any sense to me. But then I'm stuck with a barbell and not a whole lot of weight, and I know about it. So, hey, well, I have a direction I can go at least. I know these guys got a lot of good results out of, fairly little equipment. So let's go. So I started, now that I can't go do what I want to do, I'm going to have another direction. Let me go try to figure that stuff out. And lo and behold, it worked out. A lot of it worked out really, really well. I started to make better gains. At that point, I was in my early 30s. I just had my first kid. I thought I was, about as far as I was going to go, and I was just maintaining from there on, right? I had nothing super impressive, no particularly good numbers, but I thought I was just going to be maintaining for the rest of my life. And then, lo and behold, I start making gains again. I start developing abilities that I, didn't think were possible for me from some of these old time lifts that require a lot of flexibility. I started getting into more flexibility stuff. I started finding some people that are offering, really, good methods for, getting more flexible, and started seeing a lot more possibilities.
And you're not talking about you're out there doing a stretching program. You're talking about these lifts are essentially challenging your range of motion and you're getting stronger, right? Within that and improving your mobility with that.
Well, that's how it started.
Or was it a mixture?
It was kind of a mixture. That's definitely how it started. Just by doing these lifts, my range improved a lot. But then I knew that to continue getting better, I was going to have to devote myself to it more. So I ended up working with Lucas Hardy of Range of Strength to do some more dedicated mobility programming. That's helped a ton with getting my flexibility to a higher level. Because I mean, just doing these lifts alone, it's what I like to say is it's a very bang for your buck way of developing mobility, because you're going to get a lot just by doing bodybuilding. I mean, if you do bodybuilding, the old way with more range involved, you'll get a lot of the mobility, and you may not have to do a whole lot of dedicated mobility work if you're doing bodybuilding in that way. But then, obviously, if you want to, take it to the next level, you're probably going to have to do some more dedicated programming, as with anything. So,
be able to like your Zerker deadlifts, where you're bending over, picking up a bar off the ground with your elbows. That takes a fair bit of flexibility to be able to do that.
It does. At the start of my journey, I couldn't. Oh, sorry.
How much dedicated time do you spend to just a mobility routine on a weekly basis?
So the way I've been doing it, usually kind of in the summer cut, I'll try to focus more on mobility. So that will usually be like 4 workouts a week devoted to mobility. And then whatever else I can throw in, that's kind of on the front burner. And then, the winter bulking months, I focus more on, just strength and hypertrophy training. So that's, mobility is like thrown in there with whatever I can use that covers both bases. But yeah, it's kind of my focus during the summers, and then kind of on the back burner during the winters.
So what are the
my theory on that is like, if I'm not taking in the calorie surplus that I would need to put on mass, I might as well do something different and use that time to, chase a goal that doesn't necessarily require calorie surplus, and then just kind of devote when I am eating the calories, use that as the just kind of focus a lot more on something that's going to take advantage of that, if that makes sense.
Yep. Every now and again, I get this on this kick where I want to do a full splits, and I've never quite gotten there. But every few years, I'm like, I'll do that, and I do it for a few weeks. I have not put the level of consistency into that to achieve it.
I mean,
so what are some of the key differences between classic strongman lifts and the modern gym routines?
So as far as the classic lifts, I mean, I think they tend to emphasize, of course, mobility a lot more, just being able to get into the transition from one position to another to maximize the advantage you have over the weight, to just maximize the output, like your strength output, and then tendon strength as well. I think if you look at like the two feats that I think are most kind of that kind of sum up that old style the best are Arthur Saxon's bent presses. I think 371 is his heaviest number, which is a one arm overhead lift. So there were basically
that's just insane. It's just insane.
And I mean, some people don't believe it. Some people think it was exaggerated. He had one of the best reputations of the old time strongmen, because some of them were known to exaggerate their numbers or whatever. But they also had federations, and I don't know if they call them federations, organizations and judges and whatnot. And they had scales. I mean, these are people who were capable of having a world war. So I think they were capable of weighing some barbells. So I believe them, or maybe you want to say maybe the measurements weren't. I mean, they weren't using red kilogram plates that we have now, but I think something more or less along those lines.
The kilogram, you don't need kilogram plates to have a certified weight. Like that is a shortcut, because they used to just weigh all of them and have an adjudicator, review that, and here's what everything weighed. They shortcut. That's a time consuming process every time somebody sets a record. So. The shortcut to that was to create the calibrated plates that we use today. But you don't have to have those to have an adjudicated lift. Like, yeah. And that's how it was done.
I believe it. I mean, as more evidence to that, you'll see like no-name guys that we've never heard of today weighing like 150 pounds, doing in the mid 200s. Just guys, and it was considered fairly normal at that time. Not, I mean, impressive, but like, oh wow, you benched 405. That's great. Like not, these are not people that history's going to remember, but they're lifting weights that we would consider to be very, very impressive today in this technique. Yeah. So I certainly believe it. But yeah, I mean, you have to have enormous hip mobility, shoulder mobility, ability to rotate your spine, all that stuff. I mean, when I first tried this movement, I couldn't use a barbell. I had to use my gym bag with some plates in it so that I could kind of compensate for lack of external rotation in the shoulder. That way I could kind of keep my arm at an angle a little bit instead of getting back to where I would actually need to make the technique work. Because you have to basically prop your arm up on your hip so that your torso is supporting the weight, and then bend under it, which of course requires enormous hip mobility, but also tendon strength. I mean, now Saxon.
So the weight's yeah, the weight is staying kind of in the same place as you push your body down and then extend your elbow. So just as a description for our audience that may not be used to that. So it's not pressing the weight out, but so much as maintaining that in that static position as you move down and under it, extending the elbow. Right.
If you're doing it right, you won't be using your tricep at all, except maybe at the extension is going to come from your torso bending under it, and then maybe when you get right to the end, you're gonna extend your tricep maybe just a little bit. But so you have to have enormous tendon strength just to support that weight with one hand, because that's quite a bit of weight. Interestingly, Saxon had 9-inch wrists. He was like 5'7" with 9-inch wrists. I don't know how that happened, but
people have frequently like you ever look at Ed Cohn, like he's, in the lower, 5 foot realm. His hands and his feet are like somebody that's 7 foot. Like, I mean, it's just, they're ridiculous. You put up his hands and he's just like, he can palm a basketball like nothing, but he's just this tiny guy. Well, not tiny, short stature, but, obviously very thick. I mean, he was meant to fucking pick up massive weights and squat massive weights, right? Like, these are outliers, and in history, there's definitely some people, and you put them into a dedicated where that doesn't do anything on its own until you actually apply the discipline and approach to chase a goal, right?
Right, and tons of skill as well. So super technical lift, not quite the same as, I think it's kind of a slower, more patient lift. It almost feels more like something like jiu-jitsu, where you're kind of patiently waiting for your opponent to slip up, and then when he gives you, that's kind of what it feels like. You're waiting on something else to let you feel when you have the opportunity to exert your strength most efficiently. Not that I'm especially good at it, but that's kind of what it feels like. And then you've got kind of the one arm Olympic lifts. Like I'm going to be butchering this. The Charles Rigolo, I think is the best way to pronounce this. A Frenchman who did a one hand snatch of 254. One hand barbell snatch. We have video of him doing a one hand snatch. It's incredible to watch. It's so quick and fluid. You've seen it?
So beautiful. I wish I could master. I watched him. I did a one hand snatch for a while, barbell, and I got up to 215.
Oh wow!
And then
That's incredible.
I did close to 200 down into a windmill, and then rotating the bar each direction to full internal and external rotation while in a windmill.
Oh wow!
And then back up to standing. Those videos are on YouTube, but like my technique is horrible because I'm not getting under the bar. So I was always watching those lifts and like, if I could master that technique, but man, there's a huge, like the difference between 205 to 210 to 215 makes you realize how crazily far away like something like 254 is to be able to do that. Is just insane.
Were you doing you're doing just a power snatch?
Yeah, basically. I try to get it. I'd get under it a little bit, but yeah, just that single arm barbell, off the floor, to snatch it into an overhead position, and I chase that.
Yeah.
Well, I did it for years. Like people love to look at my stuff and think like, I'm the super stiffness guy. It's all about squat, not moving your spine, and not look at like all the other things that I've done in display of my circus tricks, I guess, but they're just like fun. Like, and I've always mixed those things into my routine in the off seasons through the years, just to enjoy it and have fun. And the one arm barbell snatch was absolutely my favorite. I just struggle with it now, like the windmill, because I'm missing one of my bicep heads on my right side, and then both my elbows are destroyed. So I can't actually lock the weight out, so I have to hold it on my tricep in an unlocked position, making it freaking just tremendously hard for me anymore.
Yeah, so, I can imagine. Yeah, that's hard.
I'm like, I just suck at it now because of that.
I mean, those are some pretty good numbers. I mean, I think Klokov did like 225. So if you're doing basically the same as Klokov, that's a pretty good position to be in, I would say,
with pretty shitty technique. No, it was pretty. Yeah. It was pretty good. My goal was to beat Klokov, and I didn't get there. Just didn't get there. But I was pretty fucking strong in my day. It was just brute strength and power and no technique.
That's a good thing though. I think that's what I would say is one of the big advantages of the one arm snatch. It can be as technical as you want. If you want to just go brute strength and just pure acceleration, you can do that. And I think that's got a lot of, I think athletes are kind of sleeping on the one hand snatch because it can be less technical than the two hand snatch, but tons of advantages. But then if you want to make it technical like they did back in the day, I mean, you can make it into the most technical lift there is. So it's just a really great continuum there. So I think that's definitely one that's being slept on today.
I love it. And then being able to do that and go down, do the side bend down to a windmill, touch the ground with your hand was to me, like just a great way to, display some, practice, some mobility, strength, skill, as it relates to those things. So yeah, that was some of my favorite, circus lift type stuff. I say that tongue in cheek, but it was fun, Let's dive into the world of optimizing your overall health. With pushing my physical limits, I encountered significant reductions in my health, and I reached out to Merrick Health as the premier telehealth service. I loved their personalized health coaching from the comfort of my home. They empower you with the choice of self-service diagnostic labs, or what I chose, the guided optimization with expert interpretations of blood work, health coaching, and with medications delivered to my door. Merrick Health is your partner in optimizing your health. Listeners can seize a fantastic 10% discount off their first blood work with code RESILIENCE at merrickhealth.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off.
Yeah, when I find something that I'm going to see how this works for people, and then when I find that it doesn't work, I'm not going to do that anymore. We talked about reverse Nordics earlier on. I think so when people think about exposing people to deep knee flexion, the reverse Nordic seems like it might be a beginner friendly movement because it's fairly stable. You're just on the ground. You don't have to use any particular skill or stability. You can just kind of get into it. But what I found, with a lot of people is it tends to, even if you try to scale in fairly gently with bands, which I like to do, just the fact that you're kind of locked in a fixed position, it can tend to be a little bit stressful on the knees. So I like to use other movement. So I've moved away from having people do that unless I already know their knees are rock solid. And then it's a wonderful movement to use both for hypertrophy and also just developing that range, because it's a wonderful way to develop that, quad length and, hip flexion.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fantastic mobility exercise.
I've been a proponent of a long time. After a lot of my squat sessions, I would finish out with that to really. So I'm already in a fatigue state with some extra repetition, getting that stretch in there. Fucking love them.
Oh yeah,
you just don't start with it. Yeah,
right. Yeah, so I love the movement, and that's the thing. I don't want people to have a bad experience with it and then think it's dangerous and not do it. I want people to discover it and enjoy the benefits of it. Right. But then I see people who are just, I know what you're doing. I know your thought process because I had the same thought process, but then. I'll say what I'm talking about. Milo Wolf just said, hey, ditch your leg extensions and do reverse Nordics instead. And I see his thought process because I went through the same one, but then we tested that and it doesn't work out so well. So I try to introduce people to those deep knee angles with gentler methods instead. Certainly you just don't, he doesn't even have to be scaling in it anyway. He's not even, using bands or anything like that. Just drop down and do reverse Nordics. And I see your thought process. It's not a skillful movement, but it's still not going to be. It's not going to work out in practice as well as you might think it does. Just thinking about it, So that's a good example of just running the experiment with coaching and then revising your methods based on that.
What are some other common mistakes you see with lifters and coaching?
All right, guys, we talk a lot about mental resilience on this podcast, but let's talk about another type of resilience. That's movement resilience. We want to move well, recover better, and do it for life. And it starts with your feet. And you can start today with Naboso. Naboso is a sensory technology company founded by a functional podiatrist. And all their products feature a texture to stimulate, strengthen, and awaken your feet. I use their splay toe spacers and Neuroball to release my feet at the end of every day. They also have these textured recovery socks that feel like a mini massage when you walk around. If you're looking for an effective way to bulletproof your feet, head to naboso.com. That's NABOSO.com and use code RESILIENCE for 20% off.
Well, so as far as common mistakes, I try to stay in my wheelhouse and not criticize someone on something that I don't think that I am foremost expert on. So I'm not going to try to criticize somebody's squat technique or somebody's anything that I'm not confident that I know what I'm talking about on. As far as lifters, just making what technical issues would I say I need to be commenting on? Well, I think when implementing a lot of the type of stuff that I get into, people tend to want to max out too much. They tend to want to just go straight to the 1 rep max, and that's fun and all. I like to do that too. But as far as getting into more odd lifts that have more range, things of that nature. Just like with anything else, training them with rep work and whatnot, I think is going to be more beneficial in many cases than just using it as something fun to max out on. I mean, if you just want to max out, that's cool. I do the same thing, obviously, but if you want to get the most benefit out of things like this, taking your time and taking it seriously as a training
maxing out is not a training method. It's something for show, and that's okay if you want to do that for yourself or for someone else. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the most optimal training modality, right?
Right. And yeah, I think that's going to be the issue. I mean, it's really going to be the same whether you're conventional deadlifting, whether you're searcher deadlifting. I mean, it's fun, but you're gonna get a lot more benefit out of it by actually training.
Yeah. What advice would you give a new lifter trying to combine old time lifts with modern goals?
Well, first of all, I mean, if whatever you're doing is working, then that's good. You don't necessarily have to change what you're doing if it's working. I'm not trying to take somebody who's doing 5x5 bench press, squat, and deadlift and tell them, okay, well, that's bad because it's not from this particular era. Go do something else. So if you found something that's working, go for it. But what I do think new lifters could benefit from is just a little bit of exposure to those positions that we don't often get to in modern lifting. Like back in the day, the pullover was considered like the squat for the upper body, one of the primary exercises that everybody was doing. You have a beginner come into the gym back in the day, they're going to tell you to do pullovers, right? And so you're getting your shoulder mobility. You're getting really comfortable in that overhead position, strong in that overhead position. Really before you start loading up with anything heavy. So you're going to have that mobility, that movement foundation. And I think that's going to avoid a lot of issues down the road. Same thing with the Jefferson curl. Back in the day, it was actually recommended that people start with that when they first started lifting. Again, very light weights. Like I think the recommendation in Super Strength by Alan Calvert, which is probably the best Bronze Era book in my opinion. If you're going to read one book from the Bronze Era, read that one. But anyway, he recommends people do that to get their start and then work on to heavier movements. So you built a solid foundation of movement ability throughout range. Now let's start loading up with something like a deadlift afterwards. And they were also doing, deep knee bends. They were, at that time, they just called it a deep knee bend, and that would be a squat up on the toes, right? So they're, getting deep knee flexion. So they're building up a good movement foundation from the start, and then loading it heavier as opposed to what we do now, which is we start people with the exercises that they can lift the most weight on. And then when they end up with movement issues 5 years down the road, then they start doing the range stuff. So I'm not going to tell you not to do all that stuff. I mean, squat, bench, and deadlift are proven to add tons of muscle, tons of strength. But if you want to add in some pullovers, just something to make sure that you're moving throughout range, I think that's probably going to help you a whole lot down the road.
Yeah, really insightful. Let's transition a little bit. So we've talked a lot about building physical resilience. Any insights on building mental and emotional resilience alongside the physical aspect?
I think what we often see with that is people trying to do things that are just going to provide like global mental toughness. I mean, there is a place for that, but I really think that specific preparation for whatever you need to be mentally tough in is going to be really helpful. Like just knowing, having a plan, having some idea of how to perform in that situation, just specificity, so you can, like, in some ways you almost don't want to be mentally tough in things where you don't even know what you're doing, right? Let's say, like, for me, I don't do the ice bath thing. I don't know anything about ice baths. So if I just jump in cold water, I can just be tough and just do it, right? But I don't really know what the signs of hypothermia are. I don't know how to know if, what I feel is just discomfort or is something on me about to, shrivel up, turn black, and fall off. Like, what do I watch out for? So you almost don't want to be tough. Whereas if you have a lot of experience, you've both done the research and you have experience with, getting in cold water. Okay, you know what to look out for. You can afford to be more mentally tough, and also you're not going to have that fear of the unknown because you know what to expect. You know what everything is. Same thing. Talking about a fist fight. If you can be tough all day, but if you're going up against a trained boxer and you've never you don't know how to fight, maybe you ought to be afraid of that, right? Whereas the boxer, whether he's up against a better opponent or not, at least he has a game plan. He knows what to expect, and just having that plan, I think, is really beneficial. Like, what I found is just having, when you get into a tough situation, like if you do at least know a path forward, a way, maybe it's not going to work, maybe it is, but if you have a plan, if you have a path forward, if you have ideally training to give you a game plan for what to do when you're scared or just getting a lot of negative stimulus, maybe pain, whatever, but you have that path forward, that's going to be I think that's going to be beneficial, not just because you actually have a strategy to win, but because you know what to expect, you know what you can do to make the situation work. So I think just getting getting training in various areas in whatever area you need, that's going to be more beneficial. Like, I think I see a lot of folks, like they'll there's this fake Navy SEAL boot camp thing that was going around. They were charging $20,000 to just basically get hazed for 2 days.
That was pretty disgusting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just such a misunderstanding, because I mean, the reason that the SEALs do that, it's not so much because they think the training is going to help the Navy SEAL candidates. It's because they need to weed out the ones who don't need to be there. They need to do their best to make sure that anyone who can't handle it isn't going to be there. It doesn't necessarily mean getting into cold water and getting yelled at is what's going to make you perform well in a combat situation. And so it's more to see who should be in that situation and who shouldn't. And then afterwards, when they actually train them, like they're not going to be throwing cold water. And at first, when they're teaching them marksmanship or how to scuba dive, they're going to in the learning environment, they're going to be teaching them first in a calmer environment, and then of course adding stress later to kind of sink in the lessons. But you're not going to teach anybody anything by spraying a water hose at them and yelling at them. It's a complete misunderstanding. And then, I mean, freaking 2 days, what are you nothing you're gonna learn in 2 days is gonna change your life drastically. So I like having people.
I don't think that was about teaching anybody anything. I think that was about fleecing.
If you look at the way it was advertised, it was supposed to make you a good entrepreneur and all this stuff. And they were even subtly hinting that with plausible deniability, you should be taking loans out if you can't afford it right now. Take out a loan; it'll be worth it. Like that's crazy, But yeah, you're not gonna the mental toughness that you develop, and you're not gonna. I mean, that's not gonna carry over. Something just like gritting down and just watching videos, reading books, like that requires mental toughness too, because all that stuff is going to be boring. You're gonna have to build mental toughness if you want to learn about business, because it's not all that is fun. But that if you actually have an idea what you're doing, or better yet, you actually have experience in a field, it's probably going to help a lot more with being an entrepreneur than getting sprayed with a water hose.
Yeah, I think that the big thing I'm hearing from there is just respecting it, respecting fear when you're in an unknown situation, and this commentary of being tough enough and not having fear is probably going to get you in trouble, because there's a reason that you're having that response, right? And so best way to avoid that reason is to know more about what that environment is. So if it's something that you anticipate getting in, teach yourself. That's my takeaway from what you're saying.
It's like
go ahead. All you, man.
What's that? Sorry, my toddler's being really loud out there.
Let's just wrap this up with what are your non-negotiables when it comes to coaching somebody through resilience and strength building?
Basically, they have to be willing to take it slow and not not try to push too hard too fast. They're going to have to maybe take some steps back to take some steps forward. It's going to have to be a slow process, right? So they have to be willing to not necessarily do something that looks super cool and tough right off the bat, but back it down to the level where they need to start adapting to things, and then moving forward. So there's going to have to be a willingness to do things that don't seem super cool right off the bat, and then also have like a long time horizon. This isn't necessarily going to be it's something where immediately you're going to see awesome results, but if you're willing to put in the time, be patient, not expect to have it seem super cool right off the bat, then super cool things will absolutely happen down the road.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good messaging. I'm really interested to dive into your book, Old Time Lifts for Modern Lifters. I've been following you for a number of years. Really been fantastic watching your evolution. Atlas Power Shrugged on Instagram. Where else can people find you at and learn more about your book and coaching?
Well, so that's all available on my website, which is conveniently atlaspowershrugged.com. Shopify lets you do that, which is really cool for someone getting into this stuff. I appreciate them for making it simple. And then I also have a YouTube under the same name, so it's all conveniently the same name every platform.
Awesome. Really enjoyed the discussion today. Any last words you'd like to add before we wrap it up for our listeners?
Oh, likewise. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been an honor.